The library was quiet, except for the low hum of the ancient radiator and the occasional rustle of pages from the few students who dared linger past curfew. I sat curled in a shadowed corner, the soft amber glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the pages of my journal. Yet my pen hovered uselessly above the paper. The words I wanted to inscribe tangled in my throat, drowned beneath the echo of laughter that drifted faintly through the thick stone walls. Laughter that did not belong to this world. Fear had woven itself into the fabric of our days and nights, fracturing the bonds that had once kept us tethered. Marcus, whose rational mind had been my anchor, now seemed a man pulled between disbelief and terror. His sharp eyes, once so confident, darted nervously in the hallways, his posture taut as if bracing for some unseen blow. And then there was Leela, wild, fierce Leela, whose defiance was both a shield and a dagger. Her piercing gaze challenged everyone, but especially Marcus, whose skepticism she attacked with reckless abandon. That night, the tension snapped like a brittle twig Beniathfoot. It began with a whispered argument in the dormitory, words clipped and heavy with accusation. I could hear Marcus's voice, steady but strained. "We need to be careful, Leela. Recklessness won't save anyone." But Leela's retort came sharp and biting. "Careful? Cautious? How else do you expect us to fight this? Sitting on our hands, waiting to vanish like the others?" The air thickened with frustration as their voices rose, a tempest of emotion that left no room for reason. I wanted to intervene, to bridge the growing chasm, but my own fears rooted me to the spot. The fragile trust that once bound us now lay in shards at our feet. Later, wandering the deserted corridors, I felt the weight of the school's haunted past press down on me. Shadows stretched long and sinister. The cold stone walls seemed to close in, whispering secrets I was not sure I wanted to hear. Memories of Nina, of Leela's reckless climb, of the vanished students flickered like ghostly flames, stoking the raw ache of loss and the gnawing fear that I might be next. In that oppressive silence, I wrestled with my guilt for not protecting them, for the secrets I kept locked away in the pages of my journal. Yet, amid the darkness, a fragile flame of resolve flickered. I could not let the fear win. Days later, Marcus approached me quietly in the empty courtyard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the cracked stone. His eyes held a vulnerability I had rarely seen. "Evelyn," he began, voice low, "I'm sorry for how I've been, for doubting you, and for the harsh words. I'm scared too, maybe more than I let on." The apology, tentative and genuine, thawed some of the ice that had built between us. In that silence, there was a moment, brief and precious, where hope whispered that perhaps we could mend what the shadows sought to destroy. But the crimson staircase still awaited, its dark promise lingering just beyond the veil of midnight. And I knew that if we were to survive, we would need to confront not just the horrors it concealed, but the fractures within ourselves. The night stretched ahead, heavy with dread and dread's twin, determination. The bonds that held us together might be cracked, but they were not yet broken. And I, for one, was not ready to let the darkness win. As I closed my journal and looked once more toward the window where the first hints of night crept, I felt the quiet pulse of the staircase's call. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to face it, no matter the cost. A whisper of laughter echoed faintly in the distance, a chilling reminder that time was running out, and I had to choose: heal the fractured bonds or fall alone into the crimson abyss. The choice was mine, and the night was waiting. Dawn spilled its pale light through the narrow windows of the boarding school, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers along the cold stone walls. The corridors were silent, except for an unsettling sound that seemed to ripple through the air, threading itself into the stillness. Laughter, it was faint at first, distant and childlike, yet unmistakably real. Evelyn Harper pressed her back against the rough plaster of the hallway, her breath shallow, eyes wide as the haunting echoes danced just beyond earshot. The laughter was familiar, yet impossible, an eerie reminder of those who had vanished, swallowed whole by the spectral staircase that emerged only after midnight. Her heart pounded in her chest, a tumultuous storm of fear and sorrow battling within her. The laughter was a cruel melody, carrying both the innocence of childhood and the sinister weight of loss. Each note seemed to claw at the edges of her sanity, blurring the line between memory and nightmare. She could almost see their faces, Nina, Leela, others lost to that crimson abyss, their laughter a ghostly tether dragging her closer to the edge of despair. In the dim light of the common room, Evelyn sat opposite Marcus Hale and Leela Chen, their faces etched with exhaustion and unease. The laughter, now faint but persistent, slipped through the cracked walls, infiltrating their conversation like a spectral presence. Marcus's skepticism had waned over time, replaced by a grim resolve, while Leela's rebellious fire flickered with a mix of defiance and fear. "It's like they're still here," Marcus murmured, voice tight, "but it's also like they're trapped somewhere we can't reach." Leela's eyes flashed with frustration. "We can't just wait for them to come back. We need to fight this, whatever it is." Evelyn nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the wooden table until her knuckles whitened. The laughter echoed again, a chilling reminder that time was slipping away, that each dawn marked another lost soul's passage into silence. Later, alone in her room, Evelyn lit a candle and opened her journal, the flickering flame casting trembling shadows on the walls. Her pen hovered over the pages, but the laughter grew louder, threading through her thoughts, conjuring memories of happier times now stained by fear. Faces smiled, frozen in moments of joy before the darkness swallowed them whole. She shivered, the fragile boundary between past and present dissolving in the dim glow. Outside her window, the first rays of sun painted the courtyard gold, but Evelyn's gaze was drawn to the shadow near the stairwell, a shifting form bathed in blood-red darkness, a childlike silhouette that melted into the morning mist. The laughter followed, wrapping around her like a cold embrace, a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. Caught between hope and despair, Evelyn realized that the echoes were more than just sounds. They were a call, a warning, and a challenge. To save her friends, to break the cycle, she would have to face the staircase again and the entity that waited within. Her breath hitched as the final notes of laughter faded into silence, leaving her alone with the weight of what was to come. The crimson staircase beckoned, its mystery deepening, its hunger insatiable, and Evelyn knew that the next step she took could change everything or end it all. The dawn's light trembled on the horizon, fragile and fleeting. So too was the hope that flickered within her, a flame that might yet burn through the darkness. But to reach it, she would have to descend deeper into the shadows than ever before. The dormitory was unusually silent that night, the kind of silence that weighed heavily on the chest, pressing down with an almost physical force. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the thin blanket tangled around my legs, hands clenched tightly on the worn leather cover of my journal. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second dragging me closer to the hour when the staircase would appear. Midnight, the time when the school's ancient curse would once again manifest in its most sinister form. I stared at the dark window, the moonlight casting pale slivers of silver across the floor, but it was not the moon that occupied my thoughts. It was the staircase, the cruel, crimson serpent coiling its way upward from the depths of the unknown. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, chilling and childlike yet twisted with something unholy, ringing through the halls. Nina's laughter, Leela's laughter, the laughter of those who had vanished, swallowed by the darkness. My heart pounded fiercely, thrumming against my ribs like a frantic drum. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind, but beneath it all, a stubborn ember of determination burned. I had to face it. I had to understand it. For the sake of those lost, and for my own fractured soul. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. The door creaked open, and Marcus stepped inside, his usually confident demeanor tempered by something I had never seen before, concern. "Evelyn," he said quietly, closing the door behind him, "I know you have to do this, but I'm worried. It's not just some ghost story. This thing, it's real and dangerous." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know. But if I don't confront it, nothing will change. It will keep taking more of us. I can't stand by anymore." Marcus hesitated, then moved closer, lowering his voice. "Just be careful, and if things go wrong, you have to get out. Promise me." I managed a small, grim smile. I promise. He lingered a moment longer, then turned to leave, pausing at the door. Mr. Whittaker wanted to see you. Said it was important. The caretaker's warnings had always been cryptic, his eyes shadowed with memories he refused to share openly. I wondered what new piece of the puzzle he might reveal tonight. I found Mr. Whittaker in the dim light of the main hallway. His face was more lined than usual, and the usual stoic mask was pierced by an urgency I hadn't seen before. "Evelyn," he said, voice low and gravelly, "you're about to cross a threshold that few ever return from, the staircase. It's not just a passage, it's a trap, a prison forged from pain and broken childhoods. It feeds on innocence, and it will show you your deepest fears." I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. "How do I fight something like that?" He shook his head slowly. "You don't fight it with strength alone. You need to hold on to what makes you human, hope, memory, love. But be warned, it will try to turn those against you." His words settled over me like a shroud. I nodded, feeling the weight of the coming ordeal settle on my shoulders. The school clock began its slow toll toward midnight. I stood in the corridor where the staircase was said to emerge, the cold stone floor beneath my feet grounding me in the present. The air was thick and heavy, almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then, as the final stroke of midnight echoed through the halls, a crimson glow seeped from the floorboards, coalescing into the shape of the staircase. Each step gleamed wetly, dark red like fresh blood, spiraling upward into the darkness above. The laughter rose again, soft and seductive, laced with menace. I took a deep breath, steadying the trembling of my hands. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to hide, to deny this nightmare. But I stepped forward, crossing the threshold where light and shadow blurred, where innocence and horror entwined. The staircase greeted me with a cold, unyielding presence. The air grew colder still, and the laughter twisted into a chorus of whispers, beckoning me upward. With each step, memories surfaced, childhood moments fractured by pain and neglect, faces I had tried to forget, fears I had buried deep. Yet beneath the terror, a fragile flame of hope burned. I clung to it fiercely, like a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. As I ascended, the corridor behind me faded into shadow, and the world I knew slipped away. Ahead lay the unknown, the nightmare realm where the crimson entity awaited. The staircase stretched endlessly, each step a test of will, each moment a battle against despair. But I would not turn back, not now. Not after all that had been lost. Because some nightmares must be faced to be defeated, and some stairs must be climbed to reach the light beyond. The crimson steps beneath my feet pulsed with an unnatural warmth, alive in a way that twisted my sense of reality. As I lifted my foot to the next stair, the world around me began to unravel. The familiar stone walls of the school faded, melting into a storm of swirling shadows and fractured memories. The air grew thick, heavy with whispers and the faint scent of something metallic, like rusted blood. I was no longer in the school, but suspended within a realm caught between nightmare and memory, a place where the past bled into the present. Each step echoed hollowly, but the sound was distorted, reverberating as if swallowed by an unseen void. The crimson staircase stretched endlessly upward and downward, its edges blurring and shimmering like a mirage. I felt the creeping weight of unseen eyes watching me, and then I saw them, spectral children, drifting silently through the shadows. Their forms were translucent, flickering like candlelight caught in a breeze. Their eyes were hollow pits, black and bottomless, yet filled with an aching sorrow that pulled at my heart. One reached out a transparent hand, fingers trembling as if seeking to grasp something lost. Their whispers curled around me, a chorus of broken promises and forgotten dreams. "Stay with us," they murmured, voices like the rustling of dry leaves. I wanted to scream, to flee, but my feet were rooted, caught in the gravity of their despair. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a form more solid and terrible. The crimson entity emerged, a shifting mass of blood-red darkness, its shape flickering between monstrous and childlike. Its eyes, burning coals of malevolence, fixed on me as it smiled with a twisted innocence. "You came," it said, voice thick with mockery and warmth. "You carry the scars of your past just like the others. Visions flooded my mind, fragments of my childhood broken and distorted. Faces I tried to forget twisted into grotesque parodies, laughter turning to screams. The entity fed on my fear, twisting it into a cage I could barely escape. "You belong here," it whispered, "a lost child in a world that devours hope." But within the darkness, a small light flickered, a fragile flame burning against the night. I reached toward it, feeling a surge of defiance swell inside me. The flame grew, illuminating the nightmare realm with a pale glow. Though my limbs trembled and terror gnawed at my resolve, I clenched my fists and faced the entity with a newfound strength. This was the moment where fear met courage, where the fragile hope of a broken girl stood against the consuming abyss. "I am not yours," I said, voice steady despite the quiver beneath. "I will break this cycle. I will save those lost to you." The entity recoiled, a screech piercing the air as the shadows writhed and fractured. The staircase behind me began to glow with a fierce red light, the walls of the nightmare realm trembling as the battle for my soul, and the souls of all who vanished, raged on. In that moment, the line between nightmare and reality blurred to nothing, and I understood that this fight was not just for survival, but for the very essence of innocence itself. As the flames of hope flickered stronger, I steeled myself for the long struggle ahead. The crimson staircase was no longer just a path to darkness. It was the battleground where I would face my deepest fears and the malevolent force that had haunted the school for generations. I took a deep breath, the echo of laughter fading behind me, and stepped forward into the unknown, ready to confront the nightmare that awaited. The nightmarish realm was alive and breathing, a twisted reflection of the boarding school's hidden horrors. Every corner held a memory warped by despair. Every shadow bore the weight of lost childhoods. But as I moved deeper within the crimson abyss, I realized that the darkness could be challenged, that the fragile flame of hope was not yet extinguished. And with that thought, I dared to hope, for myself, for my friends, and for all the innocent souls trapped within the endless spiral of the staircase. The nightmare realm stretched infinitely around me, a swirling tempest of crimson mist and shadow that clung to my skin like cold sweat. The metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air, mingling with faint echoes, children's laughter warped and twisted into something far darker, a chorus of innocence lost and pain unspoken. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, as if the ground beneath me was soaked in sorrow. From the depths of the swirling haze, a figure began to take form. The crimson entity emerged, its shape ever-shifting, bathed in blood-red shadows that writhed and pulsed with a life of their own. Its edges blurred and flickered, sometimes resolving into the distorted silhouettes of children, faces pale and hollow-eyed, frozen in silent screams or pleading gazes that pierced my heart. "Why do you come here, Evelyn?" The voice was a whisper, yet it echoed with the weight of countless lost souls. It was both childlike and monstrous, a cacophony of innocence corrupted. I swallowed my fear, gripping my journal tightly in one hand, the only tether to my reality. "I want to understand, to know what you are, why you take them, why you haunt this place." The entity's tendrils of shadow reached toward me, pulsing with a crimson light that seeped into my skin, cold and intoxicating. Images flooded my mind. The halls of the boarding school as they once were, vibrant with the laughter and dreams of children. Then, the darkness, disappearances, whispered rumors, families torn apart by grief. Memories I had only glimpsed in fragments now coalesced into a tapestry of pain and loss. Each vanished student, each broken home, fed the entity's power. It was not merely a malevolent force, but a living manifestation of the collective trauma that had festered within these walls for decades. The crimson staircase was its gateway, a trap woven from fear and desire, luring the innocent to feed its endless hunger. I staggered back, the weight of revelation pressing down on me. "You're all of them, the pain, the fear, the sadness. You're the darkness born from their suffering." The entity's form shuddered, faces flickering like fading memories. "I am what remains when innocence is devoured. I am the echo of forgotten cries." A shiver ran down my spine as I realized the terrible truth. To defeat it, I could not merely fight. I had to reach through the darkness to touch the fragile flame of hope still burning within the shattered remains of these lost souls. "I won't let you keep taking them," I whispered, voice trembling but steady. "There has to be another way, one that breaks this cycle of loss." For a moment, silence hung between us, a fragile truce in the heart of the nightmare. Then the entity pulsed, a wave of crimson energy washing over me, testing the boundaries of my courage. But I stood firm, the memories of my own childhood, marked by neglect and longing, fueling my resolve. I would not let this place destroy any more innocence, not if I could help it. The nightmare realm seemed to hold its breath, the swirling mists stilling as the first flicker of understanding passed between us. The battle was far from over, but this revelation, this unmasking of the entity's true nature, was the key to breaking the cycle. As the crimson shadows writhed and the echoes of laughter faded into a haunting silence, I knew the path ahead would demand everything I had, and more. But beneath the crushing weight of dread, a fragile flame of hope still flickered, refusing to be extinguished. And I would fight to keep it alive. The air around me thickened, a suffocating veil of darkness that seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart. I found myself standing in a vast void, endless and cavernous. The walls were not solid, but composed of swirling crimson mist and shadows that writhed like living things, whispering faint echoes of laughter that sent chills crawling across my skin. My breath came out in ragged clouds, visible in the icy air, and every sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence that pressed against my eardrums like a weight. In the center of this nightmare realm, I felt the fragile flame of hope flicker weakly within me, a small ember barely holding back the encroaching darkness. It was as if every childhood memory I had ever harbored, every moment of joy, every stolen laugh, every secret shared in the safety of friendship, had been distilled into this single, trembling light. Clutching it tightly, I knew this was my only weapon against what awaited me. Then, from the shadows, the entity emerged. The crimson entity, a shifting mass of blood-red shadows and grotesque shapes, its form never stable, never kind. For a moment, it took the shape of a child, a twisted, distorted silhouette with eyes that burned like molten rubies. Its gaze bore into me, a hunger so profound it seemed to tear at the edges of my soul. "You cannot save them," it hissed, its voice the echo of 1,000 lost whispers, "nor yourself. This place is your fate." I felt the darkness surge forward, tendrils of shadow reaching for me, curling like smoke to snuff out my fragile light. Panic flared within me, the old fears clawing back, the loneliness, the guilt, the helplessness that had shadowed my every step since I arrived here. I almost let go, almost let the flame die. But then I remembered Nina's laughter, faint and haunting as it was, and Leela's reckless spirit burning bright even now in that remorseless place. I thought of Marcus, his steady presence, his growing belief in the impossible. And most of all, I thought of my own childhood, the innocence I had lost but still carried somewhere deep inside. With a trembling hand, I cupped the flame tighter, its warmth seeping into my palm, its light growing stronger despite the darkness. "I refuse to be afraid," I whispered, voice cracking but fierce. "I refuse to let you win." The entity recoiled as if struck, its form flickering wildly. Shadows screamed and writhed, but the flame pulsed brighter, casting away the crimson haze, revealing glimpses of a world beyond this nightmare. I felt a surge of strength, fragile but real, coursing through me. "You feed on fear," I said, voice rising, "but I have something you cannot consume. Hope." The crimson entity howled, a sound that shattered the silence into shards of despair. It lunged again, faster this time, shadows coiling like serpents, seeking to extinguish my light. I held my ground, heart pounding, tears streaming down my face as I stared into the abyss. In that moment, the fragile flame became a beacon. It flickered, danced, and then burned steadily, a defiant blaze against the consuming dark. I was alone, yes, but not powerless. Not yet. As the entity's form began to unravel, losing coherence and strength, I took a step forward, then another, each one a battle won. The nightmares and memories twisted around me, but I would not cower. I would fight for the lost laughter, for the vanished friends, for for the innocence stolen by this cursed place. Even as the darkness threatened to swallow me whole, I clung to the fragile flame, a fragile flame that, against all odds, refused to die. But the battle was far from over, and as the shadows retreated, I knew the choices ahead would demand everything I had, and more. The crimson entity's howl faded into a low growl, promising that this confrontation was only the beginning. I exhaled slowly, the flame steady in my palm, and prepared to face whatever came next. Because some lights, however fragile, are worth fighting for, and I was determined to keep mine burning.